Hello, everyone. Ready to get started? We'll get started. This virtual format is interesting and new and different for me. So welcome to Councilman on the Corner. Usually when we have our Councilman on the Corner, we're usually out in the larger community around one another. But with COVID-19, we didn't want to take any chances. So we are now virtual and working in the computer world. I'm not a big technology guy. I'm still old school. I like to meet people where they are outside, especially during the summer. And that's how Councilman on the Corner started back in 2018. We were going to different areas of the community and meeting outside, and we've done that subsequently for the last 2 years. And now this is going on our third year, but this is our first time having to deal with a pandemic, unfortunately. So we've switched this to a virtual format. And we've talked about a lot of different issues, from what people wanted to see in their neighborhoods to events with young people, such as at the Boys and Girls Club. And then people would give ideas on different events. And one of the ones that kept coming up was the topic of mental health. So we wanted to get two experts together. Felicia and Khadijah, I wish we could be in person, but we got COVID to deal with, so we're gonna do it over the computer. So we have Khadijah Tillman and both Felicia Reed Watt, who are experts in their fields as it relates to mental health. And it's a topic that is extremely important. So we want to take the next hour just to have a open dialogue about mental health, particularly why it's important, particularly now being that we're dealing with COVID and civil unrest that's happening in the country. The economy is not doing as great as it could be because of the pandemic that's going on. So there's a lot of feelings that a lot of different people have out there. So we want to make sure that we have the opportunity to encourage people to reach out to folks, but also for you all just to give some tips based upon your expertise on why this topic is important, why it's important that we talk about it, particularly in the African-American community. A lot of folks have sent in questions that I have. So a lot of the questions that I'll ask are questions that people have sent in. But I just want to start out with just a general question for both of you, which is, why is it's important for us to focus on and talk about emotional and mental health? And whoever wants to take that first.
I just say that if we don't focus on our emotional health kind of, if you think of it like a circle, our emotional health has a lot to do with our physical health, our spiritual health, our social health. So, that's why it's important to focus on our emotional health and know where and have an emotional IQ, pretty much.
And when you say emotional IQ, tell me what you mean by that.
For me, I think to know what I'm feeling, to know what we're feeling, what our feelings are, not pushing them down, not putting them in the closet and locking them up, but actually being able to sit with our feelings and reflect on them and figure out what our feelings are trying to tell us.
Right. Miss Khadijah?
Well, I definitely agree with Miss Felicia. I think of us as holistic beings, and if one thing is off cue, if your emotional wellness is not right, that's going to have an impact on, your physical wellness. We know that untreated mental health issues can lead to physical ailments, as well as unrecognized emotions, anger, resentment, hurt, and also just how we manage our lives, right? So if you're not doing well emotionally, it's going to be a lot harder for you to navigate your family, to be productive at work. And it's just something, in this day and age, we just have to attend to it and be mindful of what's going on with us mentally.
Yeah. So Khadijah, you mentioned the connection between mental health and physical health. And I think that's a disconnect that people sometimes don't realize, that there is a correlation between the two. Can you talk about that connection, that mental connection to the physical connection?
Sure. So I think the most, basic and probably scientifically proven way is to think about stress and how, stress lives in the body. Stress becomes physical. When we're constantly under stress, whether, the stress is in our environment or we're reliving stressful moments in our heads, we have an increase of cortisone. And when you have elevated cortisone levels, on an ongoing basis, that is going to impact your physical health as well, and lead to things like, potentially high blood pressure, heart conditions, down the road.
Mm-hmm. And so for both of you, and Felicia, I'll start with you. All that's going on in the world right now. I mean, it's a lot. I'm always nervous just to even have my kids have the remote control flicking the channels, because there's so much that is going on in the world as it relates particularly to Corona, to death, to destruction. I mean, we are seeing so many things going on in the world, and we have more exposure. I mean, as a young kid, for me growing up, I might have had 2 or 3 channels, and I was much more insulated from what was going on outside. There was not the technology, there was not the social media, there was not all of the connectedness that we have now as it relates to technology. How should we as individuals be checking in with ourselves to make sure that we are okay mentally? Because if I'm going throughout my daily life, I'm working hard, I'm going hard at it, I'm trying to take care of my family, I'm trying to take care of my family, friends, work. What do I need to be doing to say, wait a minute, let me step back to make sure that I'm right, my mental, as they say, is right? What should I be looking at doing?
I'm a big proponent of mindfulness and just doing something for yourself. And it doesn't have to be anything big. It can just be sitting for an hour just with yourself, going for a walk. Again, the body and mind is spirit. Listen to what your body's telling you. Your body is going to tell you when you've had enough. And we as society, but mostly as a culture of people, we just keep going. We just keep going. We don't, as we've been taught that to keep going, but we have to take time to listen to ourselves and take care of ourselves so that we can take care of our children, our families, our community. Mm-hmm. And I think taking care of your mental health, your emotional health is the biggest part of that. It's a big part of that.
Yeah. Khadijah.
I can kind of piggyback again off of what Felicia stated. I'm also, a big advocate of mindfulness. And for those of you who don't know what that means, in its simplest form, it's attention to the here and now. So when we're going through our days and, I'm working, I'm thinking about what I'm going to cook for dinner. I'm thinking about, what's tomorrow going to look like. I'm not really present when I'm doing that. Or you don't know what's going on in your body. You don't know if you're feeling stressed or, if there's tension within your body, or if your emotions are off, if your mind is always kind of racing to what's next, or even thinking about what's happening in the past. So I always tell people that being attentive to what's happening in the here and now, your environment, where a check-in, where am I emotionally right now? What is my current stress level? What are the things that are bothering me right now? If we don't take that time for ourselves to do that, then, what are we really doing? We have to take care of ourselves so that we can serve all of these other roles that many of us are sitting in.
So what's the first step, Khadijah, for mindful? Because you say this to a mom or a dad, they're like, listen, I got to drop the kids off at school. I'm dealing with this COVID situation, which I'll ask you guys more about, trying to figure out if my kids are going to school part-time, half-time, I'm working. And then like you said, I got to cook dinner. I got to do all of these different things. What's the first step in that mindfulness approach? Like for someone who just has never thought about the mindfulness thing and think that they're too busy to even start thinking about those sorts of things.
Yeah, so a couple of things. There are several apps out there that you can utilize on your phone. I think one of them, a popular one, is Calm, and you can use that for free. And I think, I'm not sure if Calm does it, but you know, some people have like reminders on their phone, right? Where, you know, 4 times a day, you know, you get a ding on your phone and you have to check in with yourself, you know, so it reminds you to have you know, a mindful moment, even if it's just a couple of minutes, you know, just to like sit and close your eyes, take a couple of deep breaths and do that sort of present, you know, physical, emotional, and spiritual check within yourself. Now, for me, I do that, you know, throughout the day. And, you know, when I'm working with people and we're talking about mindfulness, like I'm doing all of these things myself, but I also try to steal moments. So, you know, as I'm transitioning from work to home, you know, I may decide to turn on the radio and, you know, just be present, you know, in that moment with the music, and utilize that as, you know, sort of a segue in between my two duties, or maybe I'll not have any music at all, and I'll just be attentive to the drive and everything that's happening in the here and now, and intentionally not think about when am I going to cook for dinner, or, you know, what happened at work that I didn't resolve. So I try to take moments that are already there and steal them for myself. A shower is another time where I might do that. So just try to, you know, take things that you already are doing and be attentive to make sure that that time is preserved just for you and what's happening in the right now.
And like you said, it's okay to schedule those moments. So it's okay to get them in, to get those moments in.
Yeah.
Now, Felicia, I know you work in a school setting, and a lot of parents, and one of the questions I got were from a couple of parents who had anxiety around their kids and back to school. And a lot of school, and it's a mismatch. So many school districts have different things that they're doing. Some are all online, some are hybrid, some are all in person. And they're wondering how they manage making those decisions. What's your advice to parents, particularly in a couple of, and you can answer, and both of you can answer this in a couple of ways. And Felicia, I'll start with you. Number one, having a conversation with your kids about what's going on around the decisions that you're making around the back to school, and then dealing with that anxiety. You know, there is no cure for the coronavirus right now. COVID-19 is still out there right now in Monroe County, for example. We have lower numbers, but in other parts of the country, it's much higher. Yeah. What's your advice for parents? I mean, this is and the other point I make, and the other part of the question too, is around if kids are feeling isolated, if they are, for example, not going back to school and they're gonna be at home, remote, full time, away from friends, where they're used to getting that social interaction. We know so much of school is about social interaction. How does a parent start to navigate that, in your opinion?
Yeah, and also I work with older children, so I work with children that are going off to college more so than the younger children. But I think really just acknowledging and validating the parents' feelings first, acknowledging and validating that I'm really nervous about this, that I'm scared, I don't want this, that I don't want COVID, you know, to come into my household, I don't want my child to get sick. And being able to validate that and being upfront and having those frank conversations with your children. And I think you have those conversations in an age appropriate way, right? But not hide it. I think that's important. And, you know, I've been working with clients who, they call it their bubble, right? So when our state shut down in March, their bubble got really small. It was just their family unit, right? And as things started to open up, people have started to allow people into their bubble. And I think that's one way to look at it, of allowing people, when you're ready, when you're feeling safe, to allow people in your bubble. And remember that if your child isn't going to school, that's a big loss for them socially. Their social development, a lot of it happens in school. Some of us have big families that we can get that social development from our families, but for some children, that's not happening, especially if some of the children's families isn't as healthy as others, right? So.
Right.
Yeah, so yeah, so from my end, you know, and I'll kind of speak to the position of like children who are going to school. You know, there are some families that are sending their children to school. I think you definitely have to check your anxiety. You don't want to, you know, demonstrate, you know, that nervousness in front of your children. You know, you might want to, you know, process it with a friend or a family member. You know, what we want to build confidence in our youth, our kids, that they can take precautions to keep safe, you know, that they can wear a mask, they can use hand sanitizer, you know, social distancing. And these are all methods that we actually, you know, do feel pretty confident, you know, as a nation, a world, that those mechanisms do in fact work to help reduce the spread of COVID. So we want to increase the confidence of kids that they can protect themselves by doing that, and that, you know, mom or dad or guardian has made this decision because we feel that, you know, this is the best thing for you and that you're going to be okay. And then you have to process your anxiety, you know, behind closed doors. You don't want your kids to be scared, you know, because
Right.
you're scared. And then also just, you know, there's a lot of children, like we know Rochester City School District, there, you know, nobody is going to school the first 10 weeks. I like what Felicia said about the, you know, the bubble. So if there are, you know, other families that you can try to network with, you know, maybe come up with some, you know, plans. I've heard families doing rotating homeschooling so that the burden is not on one parent and, you know, with other families, and that kids can also get some kind of socialization. And I also think we need to have, you know, realistic expectations for our kids, right? Like when you're homeschooling, you know, that doesn't mean that the kids need to be sitting and working for five to 6 hours. So we have to notice, you know, if our kids are feeling stressed and, you know, overwhelmed, and then the parent is getting stressed and we're pushing, you know, we have to be able to like back up and be reasonable. You know, I think a couple of hours a day, you know, for focused schoolwork is enough, you know, and if the child is feeling overwhelmed, you know, we have to back up and be, you know, mindful of our own kind of emotional state. So I think that, I don't know if there's anything else that I missed, Malik. Is there something else that you wanted me to speak to?
No, I think that's perfect. I think you hit it. You know, you touched on the technology piece, and that's what I do worry about for particularly children, because I know how hard it is for me to be able to balance spending hours and hours on other things. And you kind of touched on that with the young people. How should parents navigate that online learning? I mean, that's a lot to be staring at a computer screen for 5-6 hours.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what schools are doing. I'm kind of reflecting as to what it was like in the spring, you know, that model where, you know, there wasn't like, you know, in-class Zoom. But yeah, I don't know, like, I mean, if the schools are requiring the children to be like on, you know, on screen on Zoom for a while, I don't know. I think you just have to watch your children. You know, you have to be mindful, like don't, you know, if your child is feeling, you know, stressed or they seem overwhelmed, you need to listen to the child and try to communicate, you know, with the school, you know, that this isn't, you know, this might be too much. You know, oftentimes we're, you know, kind of
Right.
we have these really high expectations of children because we're not a child. So it's hard for us to put ourselves in the shoes of a child, but we, you know, definitely have to listen to them. Yeah.
I just
Great.
want.
Go ahead, Felicia.
I was just going to say, you know, even in schools, when, you know, in a normal time when school was in, there's transition time, right? They don't go from English to math right away. There's some transition. And I think that even when you're homeschooling, there has to be some type of transition. You have to, I mean, there's gyms. So you also get your children outside the house, do something, some physical or play with them.
Right. Perfect. So I want to go to some of the questions that I got sent in to me. Here's a question, and it relates to civil unrest, and it says, how should I have a conversation with my children around what's going on with civil unrest, and particularly they mentioned the George Floyd situation. Her son says, I'm scared of police. How parents have these type of conversations when, I mean, and another incident just happened yesterday or 2 days ago in Wisconsin. I mean, this is a lot, particularly, and I have two sons, so I always struggle with my kids about that conversations in an age-appropriate way, particularly when they're younger, when they're under the age of 10. How does a parent navigate these conversations? Obviously, we all have strong emotions, but we want to not hide from kids what's going on. So what's your advice to this person that asked this question?
Yeah, I mean, I think, I think that it's okay to talk to our children in a very basic, age-appropriate way about what happened. But we also have to be aware that, many, like what I'm hearing, many children are terrified of police now. So it's like the reality in their mind is that, the police, are bad, and they're out to come after, Black people, and particularly Black men. And I think that's scary. And that our children shouldn't have to carry that. So I understand that there is some reality to that, that we do have to, talk to our children about this and, teach them, how to be safe and how to navigate these situations. But, this is not, these interactions, it's not like 90%, of the time, someone is getting killed by a police officer. So we want our children to feel, safe, and that this is just my opinion, that the police generally are there to protect, and to keep society safe. But sometimes, just like in any other situation, there's bad people everywhere. There's people who make mistakes, in any profession, with the police profession, teachers, doctors, like nobody is perfect. So I try to talk about it from that, that realm, with my children. But also the reality is what it is, but it just may not be as frequent as children are starting to think that it is. Because that's stressful. Like that's a lot for a child to be carrying, that the police who are supposed to protect them are really out to get them. And it can happen at any given time. We don't want our kids carrying that, but we also want them to know that, yes, there are some bad things that are happening. And then people, across the country are coming together, to help and to make changes. And slowly we are starting to see some of those changes.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Felicia.
Yeah, I was thinking about the shades, it's not just black and white. There are these police officers that's doing all these horrific things, but there are also police officers that's not doing horrific things, and showing our children that too, right? That there's some good police officers out there. I always think about shades of gray and not black and white.
Right.
And as I think as adults, we can really, it's easy for us to go to the black and white, and our children, I think, they can go to the shades of gray a lot easier than we can.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it's a lot for a little, I'm thinking of a little kid, 8, 9 years old, to even, how do you have those, so what I'm hearing you saying is it's okay to have those conversations, but do it in a way where it's not gonna, scare them, but it's still going to make them aware that this is happening. So recognizing that it's happening. Another question someone sent in was, what should a person look for when they feel as though they want to talk to somebody? They're looking for a therapist. It's something that they can't handle it on their own, or they feel as though they're having some type of challenge. Where should they start? Where do they go to look? Because the question was, where should I look? What should I look for in a therapist? And what if I'm embarrassed about seeking help?
Mm-hmm. I know that a lot of people do feel that way. They do feel embarrassed, and there's, a lot of stigma around mental health. But I also think that we're making progress where some of that stigma is moving away. A lot of people, you know, come to therapy, you know, you just, you know, need someone to talk to, you have stress in your job. Just because you're coming to therapy doesn't mean that you're, you know, crazy or you have some kind of, you know, serious mental illness. In fact, most of the time, that's not really the case. So there's, you know, various resources in the community. You know, I myself, I'm a therapist. We have a practice called Sankofa Family Counseling Services. If I know Felicia also has, you know, a private practice where she sees clients and takes insurance. And one of the websites that is a good go-to is Psychology Today for finding a private therapist. And many therapists on there do take insurance, some don't. And there's a profile there. So you can read, you know, the profile of the therapist and get a sense if you feel like this is somebody that, you know, you can connect with. We also have, you know, agencies in the community like Strong Behavioral Health, Catholic Family Center, that also offer mental health resources. And, you know, you don't always have as much choice as to what you know, who you get for a therapist, but you can talk about, you know, when you make that intake call, like what you're looking for. You know, if you want a therapist of color, you know, I've had clients when I worked in the clinic who would make that request and they would be, you know, placed with me. Or you want to work with a woman, or you want someone who's more, you know, mature. You can make those requests in those facility agencies as well.
And you mentioned Psychology Today, and many therapists on there will do consultation. So, and during that time, you can do a 15, 20-minute, half-hour consultation phone call or Zoom call right now with a therapist, and ask them questions because you're interviewing them. You're allowing this person to come into your life, and you're going to be your most vulnerable with this person. So you should be interviewing them. And understand that you don't have to stay with that therapist either. If you get there and you're like, oh no, this isn't working, then leave. Find another therapist, ask for a referral from the therapist you're working with, so you are empowered.
Yeah, great. Yeah. So you have a choice in this. Just as if you're getting your house painted or buying a car, you should get to know the person that's doing that. It should just be, you don't have to take whatever is given to you.
That's
great
right.
Points. And this is one of my favorite questions that I got also from someone, and it goes to social media. It's interesting. We're on Facebook. I've been using more probably social media platforms because of COVID than I've ever been. I've never been a big fan of it, but it's what we have and it's what we have to do in order to get information out to people. But someone says, do you think that social media has a negative impact on mental health, or what role does it play in mental health? And I've heard people saying, hey, I'm taking a Facebook break or a Twitter break or a break from all social media just because it's negative and has an effect on their health. But then I also heard it's a way to connect with people. So what are your thoughts around that?
I mean, I think that, so yes, you know, it does seem that excessive social media use can be problematic for our mental health. It's kind of like we were talking about mindfulness, you know, it's a mindless activity. So it's kind of like when you're just not doing anything, you know, you just pick up your phone and you just start scrolling. And it's really overstimulating. Like, think about all the, you know, you do it for 2 minutes. Think about all of the images that you see and, you know, all of the different things that you read, and your, you know, kind of emotional, like, reaction, like roller coaster that you go on when you're engaging in that action. So yeah, I don't think that, you know, it's the best thing. But on the other hand, you know, as, you know, Malik, you stated, it is a way to stay connected with people. And especially during this whole COVID season, you know, people that I've spoken with, you know, that's kind of been their only, you know, social engagement, is utilizing social media. I just think it needs to be done in moderation. You should have some control. It shouldn't be like an automatic, you know, I'm not doing anything, pick up my phone, like, you know, schedule it, you know, all right, it's, you know, after dinner, you know, I'm gonna, you know, do some scrolling, or, you know, in the morning, generally people are on social media, you know, have some control over it so that you don't feel like, is controlling you.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I can't say it better. Khadijah, I think you said it. I couldn't say it better. You schedule that time. It's not good or bad. It's just what you do with it and how much time you spend with it and what's on your, I see, I don't even go on it a lot anymore. So what's on your page, what's coming through your page. I like that. Moderation.
And I've also heard people like kind of utilize social media for different things, right? So like some people are really into activism and engage in that manner, by interacting with people on social media and recognize that it is sort of stressful. But other people, and this is, like me, like I actually don't want that. I don't want my social media page to be stressful. I don't want to be angry. When I look at someone's post, I don't want to see things that I feel are disturbing. So I will unfriend people because I don't want that, in my environment. And, when I want to engage in that I will, but I don't want it when I'm looking at my page. So you have to also ask yourself, what role, what is my relationship with these platforms, and what do I want it to do for me?
Wow. I think that's a great point. Your relationship and role with the platform. I think that's a question that I would definitely ask folks that use it, because I mean, do you see it do some people use it as an outlet because they are lacking other things in their life? I mean, I've heard that before from folks. I'm no social media expert, but there are folks that are concerned with, sometimes, you'll see something presented on social media, you think it's great, but really things could be a complete and utter mess. So is that sometimes a little bit of an issue?
You mean like you're talking about the misrepresentation of like someone's life, or
right?
I mean, it's like,
like is that a
you're kind of breaking up.
Oh no, I said go ahead.
Oh, okay. So, I mean, I would say to each his own, and kind of fall back on, again, how do you want to utilize it? If you want to, display only positive things on your social media page, then that's fine. Like go right on ahead. Or if you utilize the platform for support. So some people do that, they're going through something, they state it online, and then people offer support, or people will reach out. I don't see anything wrong with that. If that's how you want to use it.
Right.
When I'm working with people, like I think in my practice, what I'll hear, and I'm sure everyone has heard this, everybody's life is so good, but mine, and then that's when you fill in like, well, no, that's just what they're deciding to show you. We don't believe that. And there's nothing wrong with it, but you just can't, just take it as at face value.
Mm-hmm.
Right. No. And then the second part of this question was about young people and social media use. I mean, I'm amazed at what age, I mean, in terms of age appropriateness from your perspective, particularly from a psychological development standpoint, what age should, I know Facebook, for example, has an age. I see little kids on TikTok. What age, what boundaries should parents be setting for young people around social media? I mean, what age is there a recommended age from the psychological perspective that folks should be getting engaged in social media? And what types of guardrails should parents be looking at putting up around these platforms?
I can go ahead.
No, you go ahead, Felicia.
I don't know of any journal or research that says what's age appropriate for social media. Again, I just think as parents, we have to be diligent, right? We have to know what our children are doing, but we also have to trust what our children are doing too. So there's that both and there. Yeah. What was the second part of your, I'm not sure if I answered your
I was
question.
wondering about guardrails, like what boundaries should parents in particular or guardians be setting up around social media use? You know, again, double-edged swords could be used for great things, but also could be a tool of not so good things. So what should parents that are listening be setting up in terms of guardrails?
Yeah, go ahead, Khadijah.
Yeah, so I was going to say that, you know, so the whole like technology age that we're in, like everything has happened so quickly, and, you know, research is limited, and then parents kind of feel forced to like do certain things, like give their children phones, and, you know, sometimes at a young age. I know one situation that comes up a lot in my practice is like when you have like your parents are not in the same home, and you know, a child might be 8 or 9 and they're visiting with the, you know, the father, and the mother and father don't have a good relationship. So then the child has a phone, but I think it's too young. I think they're too young. I think that, I actually think that teenagers are too young. This is kind of my soapbox thing, because they just don't have the self-control and the discipline, you know, the brain development to kind of to manage all of that stimulation. And there is some research that the phone, you know, the technology like functions like an addictive substance. You know, that there's dopamine levels that go off in the brain, you know, when, you know, you get a ding on your phone, or you have a certain amount of likes and things like that. So I do think that this is problematic, but unfortunately, you know, we're in an age where we're just kind of already there, and, you know, teenagers have phones. And there's not much we could do about it. So I do know that some parents have limits on certain sites. So you can like limit, you know, TikTok, you know, is a big one, you know, they turn it off, you know, after an hour or 2 a day. You know, they don't need to be on the phone, you know, on these apps all day. Set limits with your kids early. You know, if you give your child a phone, you know, take the phone away, you know, at 9 o'clock at night, you know, give the child time to decompress. You shouldn't be going to bed, you know, like texting, or you know, on an app and you fall asleep on your phone.
Right.
Start those limits early. It's better to do it early when you first give them the phone than try to do it, you know, at 16 when they've already been doing it for 4 years.
And I think it's also important that we model that, right?
Mm-hmm.
So modeling,
Yeah.
not you on me not being on my phone all the time. Modeling that, hey, I can put this phone down and I can have a good conversation with you, or I can read a book, or watch a decent show if there are any on TV, you know. So modeling.
Yeah, and you know, us adults are sometimes the worst at modeling the behavior that we expect of young folk. So we got to model it. I think that's a great question. Just one more quick question, and that's the final question of the night. And this one someone sent in, which was it kind of made me tear up a little bit. And it said that due to COVID, I've experienced a lot of deaths in my family, and I have not been able to participate and say goodbye because of the COVID restrictions. What types of things do you think I could do to honor or get through periods of losing loved ones, being that I didn't get a chance to say goodbye because of COVID?
Yeah, so
anyone who wants to take that.
Yeah, that is, you know, very, you know, difficult. Of course, the age that we're in right now, I do know that, you know, some families are doing memorial services, you know, sometimes in person, sometimes, you know, via Zoom, you know, where you can sit and have some reflection of that person's life. And if you don't have a community, you know, a large, you know, gathering of family to do that with, do it with a smaller group, or even, you know, do it yourself, you know, like set up some time, you know, to really, you know, remember and, you know, and honor the spirit of the person, you know, that you have lost. And anything that you can gather, you know, any resemblance, you know, pictures or, you know, things that have belonged to that person that can help you you know, bring some closure. But also just honoring that, you know, grief is difficult, and, you know, grief during this time is going to be difficult, you know, so you are going to feel sad, you know, and you are going to, you know, have all of these emotions and moments of despair. And if it starts to get in the way, you know, as we noted earlier, there are resources out there as far as talking to a counselor.
Yeah, I agree. Finding, you know, funerals they're ritualistic, so finding new rituals, right, to honor that person, like you said. And again, that grief is a process. It's not going to end in 5 months. It's not going to end in 6 months. Grief is a lifelong process. It can come up again in 2 years. So just being able to find a way to honor that person that you lost, your loved one, in a way that feels good and validating to you.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, I think that's great, because I think that's been one of the whole COVID-19 thing, is that it has just turned, as you all said, the rituals that we are used to dealing with and processing, just hugging, touching, it's human nature, and you haven't been able to do that. COVID has really robbed that from a lot of folks during their time of grief. And I know I've been to a couple of virtual services, which still felt so different. So my last question for both of you is, as we look at going into a new school year, we're getting towards the end of the year, what advice would you give individual selves mentally, checking in to make sure that they are set for the new year? If you have kids going back to school, you don't have kids going back to school, we know that the world is totally different than it was September 2019. September 2020 is totally different. But from a mental health perspective, what should we be thinking about as individuals? And then you can take it over to the next level, even as a community. What should myself, as a community member who's very involved and interested in the health of our community, what should we be thinking about from a mental health perspective? We talk a lot about economics, we talk a lot about education, but again, I think sometimes we don't talk enough about mental health. But what should we all be thinking about? Talk about it from the individual level, and then maybe take it up to community point, and whoever wants to start.
Yeah, so I mean, I think the biggest thing that comes to my mind is having like a structure and a routine that works for you. And I know that we don't have a lot of information as to what schooling is going to look like, you know, but you should have, you know, some kind of, you know, structure or schedule so that you and your family know what to expect and how things are going to go, what's going to happen. Try to take out time, you know, for self-care, those very simple things that we've talked about, you know, taking a walk, you know, if there's some kind of exercise that you can implement into your regimen, reading, you know, spiritual study, as much as you can, try to have, you know, family and, you know, community, like a network of people that you all can, you know, as a transactional process, rely on one another for support. And I think that kind of goes out, like, so that when I start thinking about that in social connection and community, like, we want to make sure that we have those ties. And we've all had, you know, various groups that we've been involved in, or, you know, whether it's a church group or some kind of social group, you know, make sure that you're still keeping in contact with those circles so that you can still, you know, utilize them and, you know, and rely on them for support. And then, you know, the Zoom platforms, you know, as annoying as it is for, you know, many of us, it's also, you know, been beneficial, right? Like, we've been able to really connect with people that, you know, we normally may not have been able to get out because they have kids, or, you know, maybe they have some kind of, you know, disability or medical situation, or just busy schedule. So, you know, utilize, you know, these platforms to try to stay connected with people.
You know, this is a time of unrest and a time of COVID, but I also think of it as a time of healing. And for me, a big part of healing is showing loving kindness and compassion towards yourself and towards others. And we're more apt to show it towards others than ourselves. So I think that showing the loving kindness and compassion towards self is really big and something that we have to do so that we can continue to heal as an individual, as a family, and as a community.
Great. I think great words and a great note to end on. You know, take care of each other, but also maybe taking care of yourself. Because if you're not taking care of yourself, it's going to be very hard for you to take care of others. So I want to thank Khadijah Tillman and Felicia Reed-Watt for joining us today with, I think, just some great knowledge. This was recorded, so we will be able to share it with those that weren't able to watch now. One of the things that I want to continue to do is raise the conversations about mental health. I think it's so important, and particularly from a cultural perspective, I think it's great to have two African-American women in your position in the community, that people know that you all are out there and they can use you as a resource. Thank you for the resources that you have brought as part of this conversation. And thank you for taking the time to share your time and talent and treasure with me and the broader Rochester community. So I really want to say thank you for that. And the last point I want to mention is prayer. We have this that goes into September, so we want to make sure that you do that. So thank you very much. And that concludes our live stream event. I wish I could throw you a high five because I can't shake your hand, but I want to thank you for your time, and we will definitely be in touch.
All right, thank you so much for having us.
Thank you.
All right, bye-bye.
Yeah, bye-bye.